Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight on this cold evening outside, and this time a wonderfully warm and comfortable experience inside the chamber. Do you not agree with that? So, yeah, that's much better. We've all taken our coats off tonight, so that's really good. So, welcome to the governance meeting, governance committee meeting. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you and to my left, and through the double doors and onto the riverside behind you. Please muster over the river at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive method they think are suitable. I would like to remind everyone present that the meeting is being filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it's possible that the camera may capture your image and you are deemed to be consenting to being filmed and your image and sound recording webcast. The Westgate Gardens gates to the riverbank are locked. I think they're already, aren't they, tonight? So at sunset, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door, go out by the Pelican Crossing. Okay, apologies for absence tonight, please, Pippa.
Apologies have been received from Councillors Bland, Carr-Ellis, Castle and Prentice.
Thank you. And our substitute members tonight?
Councillor Moses is present as a substitute for Councillor Prentice, and Councillor Flanagan is present for Councillor Castle.
Thank you very much for that. So, have we had any declarations of interest noted already? Is there anyone tonight that would like to make a declaration of interest that maybe they should have done but haven't done as the moment? We're all okay. No, that's okay. Excellent. Okay. Right. So you've all had a chance to have a look at the last set of minutes. So we're on item 4. So that was the meeting held on the 9th of July. I need to have that agreed. We just do that by mutual assent. So are we all happy with those minutes as being an accurate record? Thank you very much for that. That's really good. Public participation? None. Okay, so that's a shame. Okay, so item 6 now, which is the main part of our meeting tonight. So just in a moment, I'm going to ask Matthew to kind of go over and summarise what this is all about, rather than me do it twice or whatever. But what I'd like to do is to take those points that Matthew will talk us through, the changes particularly. All of you had a chance to look at the changes. They were pulled forward quite nicely in the report, and you can sort of read the changes quite clearly. There's no rush tonight. If we need to ask questions, we need to work through them to get some clarity, then that's what we do, okay? And we can then get that sorted out. So we've got a really good amendment to our constitution that we can recommend with confidence to council, and hopefully get that agreed by full council. Is that okay? That's the plan. So the plan is over to you now, Matthew, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. It's Matthew Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so the purpose of the report today is to recommend the changes to the constitution that reflect the appointment of the 2 joint chief executives and the resulting changes to the senior management structure that follow from that. When the appointments were made, the main effect of the change has been to delete a number of references to head of paid service and instead to substitute those with the joint chief executives wherever possible. What we're trying to achieve here is the ability for both officers to work as equals with parity, and to be able to make the majority of the decisions collaboratively, and either of them will be able to make a decision independently. It's written in many places that a joint chief executive can make a decision, but in practice what will happen behind the scenes is that they will make decisions collaboratively. The role of council just working through the report now, I'll just summarise the main changes that have been made. In part 2, the articles, Article 4, the role of council, we've just been clear there that the appointments of the statutory roles, being head of paid service, the Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer, will be confirmed by council, as will the appointment of any other joint chief executive. And that's part of making sure that we achieve this parity and that full council as a whole have the final decision on that, which is in the end the most senior officers of the council. It feels appropriate that you have parity where those appointments are concerned. We will bring a report back on the appointment, dismissal and disciplinary process as a whole, because obviously there are set processes that are attached to the statutory officers which are written into legislation that the other joint chief executive doesn't enjoy through legislation but can through our constitution. So what we wanted to do was make sure that we bring that back as a separate report so that it's very clear and everybody understands exactly how that would work in the event that it was ever needed. And let's hope it never will be. It's very rare that those processes are ever needed to be engaged other than for traditional sort of appointment processes. Article 7 talks about the notifications made by political groups relating to their own appointments, and they will be made to both joint chief executives, and you can liaise with them on any proposals that you might wish to bring forward. Article 12, the role of the statutory officers. Again, as I've clarified, while one is designated as head of paid service, wherever possible, I've made reference to the joint chief execs. So it's only where it's specified in legislation that it has to be a decision of the head of paid service that we've retained that within the Constitution. And just to give you a feel for the number of times each appears, I did a quick word search. There's about 250 references to joint chief executive now, and head of paid service has reduced down from about 120 down to about 50 plus. So you can see as a ratio of decision-making and responsibility, it's about 5 to 1. The joint chief executives will be able to operate collaboratively and take these decisions jointly for the most part. On the executive functions, again, the processes related to urgency and administering the call-in powers from the point of view of making sure executive members are present to answer questions along with officers. That will be dealt with jointly. Validation of call-ins will be dealt with by the monitoring officer as now. That doesn't change. And in terms of the use of urgency powers, either joint chief executive could make a request to make an urgent decision to the chair of scrutiny and then collaborate with the leader to make sure that the decision is both approved and the grounds for urgency are supported. While writing this report, I've taken the opportunity to update the references to the council companies. For those who may not have followed this closely, we have a cabinet committee. It's called Cabinet Committee brackets companies, and I've been asked if we can rethink that title because it does confuse people. So we will come back with a suggested alternative to that. We're consulting on that, and we'll incorporate it into the timetable for next year. But we've got 2 new companies that have only just recently been approved. Partnership One to deal with our revenues and benefits and customer services, and also Star Environmental Credits that will deal with the credits for developers in order to facilitate development in the area. And they weren't incorporated into the Constitution until now. And we've also got a dormant company, a property company, which although not active and hasn't been, I don't think it's ever actually been activated, has it? But it sits there just in case we need it. But through the changes that we've made to the Constitution over the years, I think because it has no profile, the references were missing, so they've been added back in. So what will happen is the oversight of all 4 companies will be managed through the Cabinet Committee, and then decision making will be made by Cabinet. And to make sure that it's consistent across the 4, we're proposing some small changes to the way that the reserved matters are dealt with under all of these companies, so that it's the same for all. So reserved matters are those which are reserved for councils. The company themselves cannot take them without reference back to the councils and approval from us. So it might include, for example, taking out loans, maybe taking on a new customer, which could affect the service that they deliver for us. They can't do things like that without reference to us first. And in order to make it consistent, what we're going to do is say that the Cabinet Committee will maintain the oversight of the corporate health and will make recommendations on reserve matters, but that the decisions related to reserve matters will be taken by Cabinet. And what that will do is make it very clear then where the oversight sits and where the final decision making and accountability sits. So that will help the new Joint Chief Executives. I think now that we're administering more companies and the complexity becomes greater, we need clarity on how those arrangements work, in order that we can all follow and understand them and not trip up on a technicality. Finally, on the delegations, probably the most significant number of changes. The scheme of delegations from council to officers is basically what enables the officers to sort of get on and do the job without referring matters to committee. A lot of changes there where matters were previously, sorry, I couldn't find the word previously, allocated to the 3 directors. Now the 2 Joint Chief Executives will undertake the majority of those. Some exceptions to that would be who has ultimate accountability on ombudsman matters and the health and safety executive matters. They will be for head of paid service, because again they need a sort of a figurehead role, and it's designated that that's who it should be. But for the most part, they will, instead of being the 3 directors, it will be the 2 joint chiefs. What that means then is that the service directors, who previously enjoyed delegations alongside their directors, now have those allocated purely for them. So instead of it being the director and the service director can undertake this, it will be the service director has it for themselves. You might want to think about whether we actually need to continue with the reference to service director. I think it was used to designate the difference in the hierarchy, but of course we don't have directors now, and that's perhaps something to reflect on in a moment. The proper officer provisions, they sit alongside the delegations, and the reason for those is where in legislation it refers to a proper officer shall decide whatever it is. We then need to designate who that proper officer should be in our constitution. So what we've done is we've gone through and allocated the majority to the Joint Chief Executives, so that either of them can take a decision that was previously allocated to head of paid service, or in some cases where it can be dealt with at a lower level, it may have been allocated to the director or another officer. Other than that, financial procedure rules and contract standing orders. The contract standing orders have been updated firstly to reflect the new senior management structure, but also to make changes to the thresholds to ensure that we are still compliant with the new financial thresholds for tenders, and also for the rules related to the debarment list of contractors who we don't have to use because they appear on a list which says we don't have to. Other than that, we then have the 2 appendices that I've highlighted there where I've made minor changes, but again that's mainly to terminology and not significant in terms of impact. So I think that's it by way of summary. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
That's great. Thank you for that, Matthew. We'll just take a bit of a breath on that one. So what I'm going to do before we go, ask too many questions or whatever, is I'm just going to read out the recommendations that we will need to vote on later, and I'll be looking for somebody to second that, and then we'll move forward and we'll take these sort of basically kind of almost like one at a time, which is bounce our way through. So is to recommend to council that the arrangements set out in the report to reflect the changes to the senior management structure are approved. And the second point, that the arrangements for the oversight of council companies are adopted as set out in part 6 of the Constitution. That's the amendments that we've gone through there. So could I ask somebody to second that before we start our debate? Thank you very much. Thanks, Steph. Right, that's really good. So we've got that proposed and seconded now. Right, let's just go through quite briefly, and if you pick out anything, I might do or whatever. So the part 2 then, the articles. Any points that anyone wants to raise on those? That's the head of pay service and finance officers and monitoring officers and all that sort of stuff at the beginning of it. Are we happy about that bit? Okay, that's articles, amendments to articles 4, 7 and 12. Part 4, now the Constitution, the changes to the council procedure rules. Happy with that? Okay. Committee terms of reference, part 5. Okay with that? I'm beginning to wonder here, actually, whether we've got this perfect. You know that, don't you? Absolutely perfect, and that's, you know, so I'm really pleased about that. So that's good. Executive functions now. Obviously, down to council companies. Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks. Just a concern about the council companies. I understand why it's happening, but at the moment, council companies, which has always been a stupid name and does need changing it next year in the calendar or the diary, the frequency of meetings might need to increase, because I'm really worried that at the moment, when we look at Canenco, can take a long time to go through, and that meets twice a year to go through it. So if there's 2 other active companies and a third company there, you might need to consider the timing of them. And also my question is that these are also shared companies with other local authorities. So how will they be involved, and how will we know what's taking place within their company's cabinet committee as well? Because obviously we can make decisions or recommendations which might not be made by the other local authorities.
You won't be surprised that we ask those questions as well. Actually, they're similar. I'll get Matthew to just pick up. I need to catch where he is in that. But in essence, the shared company that is taken over from Civica, the something one, isn't it? I can't get that out of my partnership one. That will it'd be like a sort of East Kent Services kind of arrangement of meetings with the other councils and that sort of thing. Matthew filled the details there. So that's kind of the way we're going to share that responsibility again. And the other ones, I think we're looking to ultimately try to sync them together into the same piece of time frame. So if you're with it, then take it away, please, Tricia, and just explain what's going on.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't actually going to answer the question. I didn't realise we were going to get into the detail of companies. Because I should declare an interest. I'm currently a director of Partnership One, and Matthew will declare an interest.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
That from the 1st of January, when Tricia is no longer with us, I will be a director of Partnership One.
Could you, Matthew? Could you the bit? Sorry, the bit which you talked about the way of the workload that Joe raises and how we were going to try and pull that together, and then obviously the oversight arrangements of Partnership One. Really, just very quickly for the tape and for.
Thank you. And yeah, very good questions. I think so. The pattern that we have with Kanenko is that we have 2 meetings a year minimum. One to look at the sort of company health, if you like, which is looking at their accreditations, their compliance, health and safety, and so on. And then we have another one where we look at the business plan, which is a backward look at how they've done against the business plan and a forward look at what their objectives are for next year. I think we would anticipate, although with Partnership One there will be the East Kent Services Committee, that will have a role working as the 3 in partnership. So board decisions from the company will go to the East Kent Services Committee to make a recommendation through to the cabinets, and the cabinets will ratify them. Partnership One can go through a similar route. Partnership One will go through that route, but that's still, I think, layered on top of that. If we want to have oversight of the company health of Partnership One and to review the business plan through the council company route, then we can. So we can do similar for Kanenko and for Partnership One, even though their decision-making routes then are slightly different. With the environmental credits company, that's slightly different because it's a partnership with Ashford. So Cabinet have agreed to establish the company, and the arrangements at the moment are basically with the 2 cabinets to maintain the oversight, and then for each council to decide on its arrangements for maintaining oversight of the company. We would do it through this company committee, and Ashford will have its own mechanism. And then if there are decisions that are needed that have to be referred back, they can be referred back through the council, through the cabinet committee to cabinet for a final decision. So I think we will be able to plot a route that feels consistent across all 3. And I would anticipate that we will arrange for a sort of company health and business plan rhythm for all 3 of them through the cabinet committee that will be renamed.
So ultimately, the cabinet committee, which is going to be renamed, is basically ultimately just an oversight committee. And where possible in the calendar or diary of meetings, it will link in with the East Kent Services Committee and also perhaps Ashford or whatever Ashford are doing with theirs. Okay, just for clarification. Thank you.
Yes, exactly that.
It's a really good point because, the way forward is going to be, it'll take a little time to get things to sink in, I think, maybe a couple of years, but ultimately I think it could be robust. And of course, they're both brand new companies, so they may well need a little bit of tweaking as well over the months to come. Who knows? I don't know. Okay, really good point. Any other questions on that at all? Okay. Get to parts. Part 7, so overview and scrutiny procedures. I think it's fine. 8.1, schemes of delegation from council officers. Are we sort of happy about that? Again, I think it's kind of fairly straightforward, and I kind of did say to Matthew the other day that I'm pretty sure that sooner or later there's going to be something that we've not quite changed the word of, but there'll be a box of chocolates to the first person that finds that in the constitution when they're not sleeping one of the night, and that'll be fine. But let's not worry about that. We could easily sort that at another meeting if we really need to. Sweet. Right. Yeah. So Matthew hinted at this in his summary. So at the moment, the reference is to a service director, meaning the heads of the different parts of in the council we're all used to. And the proposal that I would like to put forward is to just change that to director. So it'd be the director of, rather than the service director of. We just think it's clearer. Probably just sort of slid through that we didn't think about changing that until we were chatting about it just a couple of days ago. So that is a slight amendment to the wording. I'd like to do that. If anyone can agree with me is that okay? Thank you, Joe. So seconded, so proposed and seconded. We just need to agree that by show of hands. Can we do that? Or do a vote? Yeah, just add it to the recommendation then, that's absolutely fine. So the version that comes to council will have that amendment in it that we can recommend. Okay, that's a really good, thank you Matthew for that, I appreciate that, it reminded me of that. Financial procedures was 9, we're okay with those changes there. The contract standing orders, and then anything in the appendices. Okay. James.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small point. On page 16, Appendix H, petition scheme, the first sentence says, determinations on whether a petition can be rejected for vexatious reasons will be made by a joint chief executive. Question is, why would it be just one? If it's a petition, which is clearly a major contribution from members of the public to this council, and given that the definition of vexatious is causing or tending to cause annoyance or frustration, shouldn't it be a case that both joint chief executives should be deciding that rather than one, notwithstanding the professionalism and high conduct of our joint chief executives, but from a governance point of view, I just wonder whether that should be both rather than just one.
Yeah, thanks, James. Did you want to come back in on that, Councillor Worley, or Simon, did you? No, okay, that's fine. Thanks for that. It sounds like a really quite a good point, actually, because we can't be any criticism for that, can we? Does that cause a problem if one person's not available? Is there something you can do for that, or just?
Do you want to take it? Yes, I mean the reason, and that this is peppered throughout the whole constitution. We've specified a joint chief executive so that we don't get caught on the hook when the other joint chief executive isn't around and we need to make a decision. And if it says both and both are not able for whatever reason, not necessarily foreseen, the way that the officers are operating, the way that we intend this to work behind the scenes is if you have a decision from a chief executive, then as far as we're concerned, that's the decision of both joint chief executives. For the most part, they will be collaborating in everything that they do, and their decisions will be shared joint decisions. But if procedurally we say it has to be both each time, then it could bring delay and potentially a difficulty with non-compliance with our procedure where we've specified both, and it's when actually what our procedure says is it's a joint chief executive who is capable of making that decision.
Tricia, do you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just thinking about how we do it at the moment. So at the moment, it would say that I can make that decision to reject. But in practice, I would make a decision based on probably a conversation with Matthew, with Jan, and it might well be with Susie and Peter as well. So there's a difference between, you know, the formal bit about who actually has to sign the piece of paper that says, no, this is rejected, and the consideration that takes place behind the scenes. And I suspect it would be exactly the same in this situation. But this does allow, you know, if one of the joint chief executives has got a conflict of interest or they're not available, you've got one person can do it. But in practice, they'd be very courageous if they made the decision by themselves without talking to Jan, without talking to Matthew, and having that consideration. So there is that safeguard happening in the background.
Thank you. Simon, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to ask him, Tricia may have answered it, and it's quite a simple point though, but what if the two chief executives are in direct disagreement, but that might be, as you say, decided behind the scenes and anyway, but thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point, Simon. I think it helps it. That's Tricia, yeah.
Yeah, I think Matthew will correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think what we're allowing in here is that if there is a conflict, then ultimately the head of paid service can make that ultimate decision between the two, because you have to, as you say, Simon, you have to have some means of resolving a deadlock situation between two people. So it would be the head of paid service ultimately, but you would expect that to be very rare. And so just going back to the petition point, I think because people putting forward petitions, and that is part of the public participation that we're trying to encourage. It will be very rare that a petition would be rejected on the grounds of being vexatious. That's something that would be really considered carefully and thoroughly, and that's why I'm saying behind the scenes you would get lots of consultation and consideration going on before that sort of decision was made.
Sorry, Chair, can I therefore make the suggestion that we try and think of, not wishing to delay us, but some wording along those lines that Tricia's just mentioned, that following advice, because it works both ways, because it's a petition and it's a public petition. You also want to afford protection to the Joint Chief Executive. You know, as it's worded at the moment, it's just their decision. But if we get in the words following advice, then clearly that covers them, as well as making the point quite clearly that this is a serious point, because petitions and public engagement is something that we're looking to encourage all the time.
I think, yeah, because I was just going to come back to you and say, could you think of a public reason why people will be looking at that badly? I think you've summarised it. I mean, I personally have got no problem with some clarity there. I mean, can we leave you to make a minor adjustment to clarify that point? Yeah.
Yep. Yes, we can make that adjustment. That's fine.
So we get that point amended, ready for voting through at council. Any other bits on the petition scheme? Obviously, something that's quite important. Actually, we're getting more and more petitions, which I think is really good. I think that's probably every point. Is there anything else that people want to raise or get some clarity on before we go to the vote on that? Are we happy to? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to something Matthew alluded to, that this phrasing is peppered throughout the report. Do we need to revisit, do a word search to add the clarity that's been suggested throughout the report?
I think that's probably, we can do that in what's the definition of the Joint Chief Exec, can't we? Which is defined. So that's good. We will check. I mean, I'll get Matthew to check that to make sure that's absolutely clear. I think in that, but it's a good point. Yeah.
Yes, I think if I include it in a couple of places as general wording, perhaps above the delegations, the proper officer provisions, something in the summary at the very beginning that just explains where it specifies a Joint Chief Executive, the expectation is that they will work in collaboration with each other, and only by exception will decisions be made without reference to each other. Something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the useful bit, because we got that in the very front of the Constitution, haven't we, about the role kind of thing described, isn't it? So that's really good. I'm happy with that. Okay, so when we take a vote in a moment, we will be recommending this report with the amendments that we've discussed and the minor changes in wording we can check out before we vote at council. And we'll be recommending the changes to the Constitution that reflect what we voted on tonight. Okay, so the whole document is the Constitution, which will be, after we've agreed it, a council will be the new Constitution. Okay, which is kind of still that thick. All right, so we, sorry, so I just wondered what the hell it was on my desk tonight, but there we go. Okay, so if we're happy to go for a vote, we go for a vote. So vote 4 is to accept those recommendations to council.
And that's carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you for that, all of you. Really appreciate that. Okay. And I would just say now, obviously, if any of you want to endorse or support those changes at full council, I'm sure the Lord Mayor will invite you to speak on the item as well. If any of you want to put your point to that as well, we would welcome that from committee members as well. Okay. So, date time next meeting, yeah? Yeah, okay. So the date and time of the next meeting is the 25th of February next year. I haven't got any other urgent business to be dealt with in public. I don't think that's changed, is it? Okay. We don't need to exclude the press and public, as we don't have any of items appropriate for that. And also, we don't need to deal with any other urgent business which falls under the exempt provisions. So, go ahead. Yeah.
Chair, I just wanted to say thank you to Matthew and his team for the work that's gone into this. I think we shouldn't
I think we
gloss
can
past that.
we can endorse that, Ian. I think you're absolutely right to do that. It's a mission and a half, isn't it? It's a huge document that I think it's one of the things you open it up and you start fiddling about with it, and sooner or later other bits come out of it, and nightmare. We really appreciate it. Thank you for that. So we're really good. So I'm going to close the meeting now at